Hey listeners, it's Andre here. I just wanted to record a short disclaimer before we get into this week's episode. Michael and I have been very explicit about the fact that we are trying to raise the discourse, tidy up our language, and really just be more professional in how we do this podcast. However, in this episode, things got a little bit heated. We were discussing a topic that we care a great deal about, which is how do we get more people in Ontario to drink Ontario wine. So we were a little bit more blue with our language. We hope that you forgive us for it and you enjoy this episode.
You're listening to Two Guys Talking Wine with Michael Pincus and Andre Prue.
Michael, how's it going?
Oh, Andre, you don't want to know. Italian internet sucks.
Yeah, it's been an adventure, definitely trying to do regular interviews with you while you're literally in the middle of nowhere in Italy. But it's my understanding you're going to be back on Canadian soil shortly.
I have less than 2 weeks to go from day of recording.
So I thought we would take a look at a bit of a revisit of what happened last week when we talked about our podcast a couple weeks ago. It still seems like, you know, we're surrounded in a climate of unpredictability, you know, tariffs on, tariffs off. We're recording this on March 27th. A new round of tariffs have been announced on autos, and even then, it doesn't appear that things are clear. Has anything changed in Italy, Michael?
Well, I believe that now European cars are also as part of that 25%. Obviously, the orange pumpkin is trying to deflect from that disastrous signal debacle that he's dealing with now, which is actually kind of funny. And really what is happening here is you're hearing a whole bunch of Europeans making fun of the Americans more than usual. So, it is just like nobody can take him seriously. And I get what's interesting is I get a lot of European YouTube feeds, especially from the UK, and my God, it's the way they talk about him. You never thought they would talk about a U.S. president in this way, but yeah, it really is bad.
Have you been paying attention to Instagram?
I've been looking at Instagram. If I'm to understand Instagram, the Buy Canadian movement is, you know, in full swing. And like the way people are using going to Costco and going shopping and shopping online, and you know what, I even fell prey to it the other day where I was looking for some socks and I found like 6 or 7 Canadian sock companies. And I wanted to go with one, but they wouldn't get back to me. I asked a question and all they would do is send me marketing stuff. They wouldn't send me any answers to my question. So,
you know, I think you're completely right.
If you're gonna do the Buy Canadian thing, listen to a customer. Take a look at what's going on in your email once in a while.
You know, it is interesting to see the Buy Local movement. My feed, obviously, I follow mainly wine accounts with my Instagram account, and I guess a quick plug at Andre Wine Review for me, at The Grape Guy for you. And it seems like every content creator north of the border has been trying to come up with a list of substitutes, trying to get people who would typically grab a bottle of J-Lore or Josh and switch to something different. Now, there's a friend of mine who's about to join the program, Laura Milne's Crushable Wine Club on Instagram. And Laura posted a video, I guess it's about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, that really took off. The day we're recording this, it's sitting at 862,000 views. And we are going to talk a bit about the content of the particular reel. But, Michael, I just wanted to read a few comments to you where I don't think I've ever felt more validated about my cynicism last week. The real, the long and the short of it,
Am I allowed to comment on these things, or you're just going to read them
I will
out?
let you comment on them because, Michael, like you and I have been writing about Canadian wine. I started in 2010. You started in 1865. We've both been doing
Yep.
this for a long time, right?
Yeah, I was there at the American War of Independence, crossed over the border and planted my first vines. Thank you very much.
So the content of the reel is alternatives to the large mass-produced American brands. And here are some of the comments that were posted, because I've been paying attention to this reel, and it's been really interesting to see. So the first one I want to highlight is from JDeb63. Only Italians know how to make wine. I've heard that before in Niagara.
Now, I would say that the Italians say the same thing, so that person must be Italian. And I would also say that it also depends where you are in Italy. Like if you're in Tuscany, they would say only Tuscans can make good wine. So if you say I'm going to Campania to drink some wine, they'd go, why? You're already in Tuscany. So that's a fair comment. I'm going to go with that. If they're Italian, that's fair comment. That's fair comment.
Hallie James. We have access to French, Italian, and Spanish wines. No need to lower yourself to drinking Ontario wines.
Now that one I find a little bit offensive. Just as an Ontario wine drinker, I think that they're having the wrong Ontario wine. That's what I'll say to that one. They've had the wrong one.
Burlog 27. Niagara wines are way overpriced. I'll stick to French, Italian, Australian, or South American wines. Name me a good Canadian Cab Sauv, Merlot, or Shiraz for under $25. Cab Franc is the only decent red the Niagara region makes, and it's way, way overpriced.
See, I would disagree with the overpricing of Cabernet Franc. Look at Brian Schmidt's Cab Franc there. Every year it seems to be a banger, and he's doing a good job. So I have no time for that person whatsoever.
Okay, now just the last one here from Amanda Souza, or just drink wine from Europe. Lower sugar, better quality grapes. Now, tell me you don't know anything about how a grape is grown without telling me you don't know how a grape is grown.
Yeah, exactly. Like lower sugar. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So,
yeah, because the Europeans don't have any sugar in their wine. No, none at
so
all.
Laura, we've heard you chuckle a little bit as I was reading these comments. You've been posting them on your feed, and another shameless shout out at Crushable Wine Club on Instagram. How does it feel to go viral?
I mean, honestly, it's a bit anticlimactic because I've been beating this drum for the better part of a decade now, and it's like, it's about damn time. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like, it's a little too convenient, it's a little too rich. Like, oh, now you're paying attention that you can't get your swill. So I don't know, maybe I'm a bit cynical, but it's great to reach more people. I think that, I don't know, maybe there was like a little bit of a mismatch, or I just wasn't getting out to the right people. So I know that I'm reaching the right ones, and I know that the ones who are just merely looking for the replacements until they can start buying Josh and J. Lore again, they will definitely fall off. But I think I will retain a good chunk of the audience because people just don't know what they don't know. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole thing. I don't think that it's this special sauce that's going to just catapult my business to the next echelon. I think it's just one step in the right direction.
But before we get into like the discussion about the comments, and I guess this is a little bit of the state of the union of Canadian wine, can you tell us a little bit about your business, what you do, how long you've been doing it? And you've talked about beating a drum, just because a lot of the people listening to this podcast probably don't know who you are. Describe the drum in great detail.
Yeah, so I made the very foolish decision back in 2019 to specialize exclusively in Canadian wine. And that was when I had moved to Toronto with my husband. And I knew that I needed to pick a direction because you can't know it all. There are many people in the industry who masquerade as though they do, and good for them. But, you know, the joke's on them. But I realized moving here and exposing and introducing other sommeliers and wine bar owners to my BC wine collection, how little they knew about anything outside of Ontario. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And so concurrently, I had also just recently been to Portland, Oregon, where I had attended this really intimate wine tasting and was exposed to really unique and obscure varieties from the Willamette Valley. And so I sort of remarked to myself, like, maybe I should do something like that in Toronto. And so I did. I launched this Canadian wine tasting experience that was hosted out of my home, really intimate, small groups, eight or less people. And the reception was outstanding. People were shocked that Canada actually does produce great wine. The most surprised were the locals. They didn't realize that, wine was being made on Vancouver Island or in Nova Scotia or in Quebec. And as you are both very well versed in our interprovincial trade barriers, people think that, they quote unquote are not allowed to access this. So around that same time, I launched my direct to consumer wine club, where I offer anywhere from, 2 to 4 offers per month featuring a different family owned, very small, largely like low intervention, natural producers, just because that's more the category that I'm into. And it's been 6 years now that I've been doing this. And the funniest question that I get still, and I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or what the reason might be, people ask if it's my side hustle. Which I'm like, I've been around long enough that I don't take that stuff personally anymore. It's like people who ask really ignorant questions like that, it says more about them than it does about me. And it's also confirmation that I have to keep going, that I have to keep waving this flag and being really unapologetic and showing people that we do produce really beautiful wines here. And all you have to do is just get the liquid in the glass and get them drinking it. That's all you have to do. But that's the hardest part. So
I would like to interject there. The side hustle question is not as ridiculous as you might think, because a lot of people make wine their side hustle because they can't make a living at it. So even winery owners, the winery becomes their side hustle. So
hello.
Yeah, that's true. That's a valid point.
I wouldn't poo-poo the side hustle. I would think anything regarding you being a woman would be one of those questions that you're like, fuck off.
I mean, all three of us have been around for a little while in terms of having a chance to deal with consumers, dealing with industry professionals, and the sampling of comments that I just read from Instagram is definitely not, let's just say, definitely not unpopular points of view. It's something that we have been fighting against, that I think it's safe to say all of us have been fighting against since we dipped our toes in the pond and got into this industry. I guess the question I just want to ask, because Michael, you do wine tours and you've now spent quite a few months in Europe to have a chance to talk to people at trade shows and go to different wineries and speak with other professionals. Laura, you host tons of people at your very busy studio. How prevalent are those opinions about Canadian wine? Laura, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say that's the commonly held belief. And it's across the board. It's Europeans, it's the British, it's Americans. I wouldn't even say it's a negative purview. I would say it's just ignorance at large. People just have absolutely no idea. And they're always surprised, not only that wine is being produced in so many different areas, but that it's being produced at the caliber and quality level that it is. Every now and again, I'll get, particularly pretentious and really snooty people. Like I had this one guy, a British guy actually, who just, thought that he knew everything. And then it turned out all he drank was Big Reds. So as soon as we got to the Reds, oh yes, these are amazing. But he would literally set aside his glass, whether it was bubbles or rosé or white, and I had to actually dump his glass into the spittoon for him. Like that's the level of pretentiousness that we're talking. So yeah, I encounter some pretty gross opinions and behaviors, but I don't know. People are going to people, and it's your job to try and convince them that maybe what they think is not entirely accurate. And if you can do that successfully, even if it's just one wine that changes their mind, I consider that a win, because like I was saying to you earlier, Andre, before we were recording, you have to meet people where they are. Like you can't just flip the script on them. Like you have to meet them and, open that door so that it can then lead to another door, or like provide them access to a bridge that's going to be this sort of de facto, what I call like conversion therapy. Like Like, think about your own patterns of behavior. I think we all like to think we're open-minded, but we're really not. We all hold biases, and I think it's subconscious too. There's a lot of propaganda surrounding Canadians and our products being inferior, and we're a mouse in the shadow of an elephant. Like, there's so many different reasons as to why. Like, look at Canadian media and movies, and it's like, oh, this looks or sounds or feels Canadian. What does that mean? Shit, right? So we feel that way about our own products and music and everything, and so it's up to us to change that narrative. So,
Michael?
Well, where I'm coming from is I have been in Europe for quite a bit of time now, and mostly who I'm meeting are first of all, winery principals. And I can say to you, Andre, you're going to have to be making a lot of dinners in Hamilton, because I've got, if ever these people come over, they like they say they want to. Everybody wants to come to Canada, first of all. But they want to taste Canadian wine. Obviously, if you're a winemaker in Italy, you want to taste a Canadian wine. If you're a winemaker in France, you want to taste a Canadian wine. If you're wine curious in Italy, where you taste mostly Italian wine, you want to taste Canadian wine. And so there is a high amount of interest. And when these winemakers come over, they have my card. They're able to look me up, and hopefully we'll get to sit down with them and talk, their wine and also some Canadian wine with them to find out what they think of it. I find that the winery principals are very open-minded. I put my other hat on, which is the guy who does wine tours, and that's where I have to agree with Laura, is that there are a lot of people who just shut right down when I'm being dragged here by my wife. This is what she wanted to do for her birthday, so I'm here. I only drink California. And you know what? At that point, it's like, you know what? Just have a good time then. You know what? This is not California. It's not going to taste like California. I will try to change your mind with a couple of things. If I can't, you know what? I'm willing to lose those people for his wife who loves it.
And I mean, for myself, like the one thing that I found frustrating reading those comments, and Laura, I appreciate that you posted them really tongue in cheek, is the sheer ignorance that comes with them. Because one thing that I have found when you're talking to people who have a favorite wine that they like, or have a wine that they enjoy, if they don't like, there's a difference between not liking Canadian wine and saying that they don't make good wine in Ontario, right? If I'm sure Laura and Michael, both of you have had this experience dealing with consumers as well, is, on one hand, I understand if your jam is big reds, like, fantastic. Fill your cellar, fill your boots, fill your glass. But don't tell me that Ontario wine sucks because you don't like, a medium light bodied Gamay or medium light bodied Pinot Noir. It just means you don't like it. It doesn't mean it's bad. And I think that's something that I find very frustrating. But also the lack of certain people's open-mindedness to accept that there's more to life than one style of wine.
I mean, I already knew that existed, but it's the sheer scale of it is what I find so alarming. How many people hold these beliefs and are so stuck in their ways? And I mean, my own family, they're all from Ontario. My aunt drinks Wayne Gretzky.
Okay.
And I can't begrudge her for that. It's just like, I don't know. She's 65 years old. Like, what am I going to do? Tell her that she should be drinking something else? Like, I don't really give a shit. She puts ice cubes in her wine. At least it's Canadian. Like,
Michael?
I am still stuck on the ice cubes in the wine, which always bothers the hell out of me. So, I will, especially being in Italy, I'm drinking wine out of some juice glasses and realizing that this is an Italian wine glass sometimes. But I've now forgotten the question because I'm still stuck on the ice cubes.
Well, I was just talking about, at the very least, if it's not a touchdown, it's a field goal to get people to stop saying Ontario wine sucks, because that's patently untrue. You can not like something while acknowledge that it still exists. I mean, that's something that, Michael, you and I have had to do as critics, and I'm sure, Laura, you as well as a wine professional, is we can taste a wine that we don't like and recognize the quality of it, right? And
or
I think
be blinded on a wine we think we don't like and love it.
Yeah, or that too.
I find that a lot of the people who say that Ontario wines suck have not actually tried an Ontario wine, which is sad that we're already predetermined to say it sucks, and or they have tried something and you go like, where have you tried that from? And they go, oh, I've tried it from I went to Joseph's, and I'm like, yeah, I know now why you don't like Canadian wine. So, if you've been to the wrong winery, if you haven't tasted something from a quality producer, if you've just gone to a mass producer or somebody who's, overcropping, or there's so many reasons. Look, we are a small industry in Ontario, and what I have noticed is that we are probably proportional to Italy, to France, to pretty much anywhere in the world for great winemakers, kind of middling winemakers, and then crappy winemakers. The percentage kind of ranks out to about 20% of the wine is garbage. I'm sorry, folks. Just 20% of wine out there that is just not well made. Then there's that mushy middle that's probably, 60 to 70%, which is, drinkable, good wine, nothing wrong with it, clean. And then there's probably like that 10%, 15% echelon that is just really great wine. And that's across the board, every region, everywhere in the world. There's crappy wine, there's middling wine, there's really great wine being made.
It's hard to pinpoint sort of the one thing that's going wrong in Ontario. And I mean, I don't really want to harp on the negative because there's definitely some good stuff taking place. And I mean, Laura, that's one of the reasons why we're having you on this podcast, because you're one of the good things taking place in terms of how Ontario wine is being marketed. Same thing with you, Michael, on the tour buses. But how do we just reprogram people to let them know that the $15 really good bottle of Ontario wine doesn't exist? And okay, fine, there's, like the French language, a couple of exceptions. We talked about Brian Schmidt, but across the board, there is so much more shit wine below $15 in Ontario, or frankly below $20, than there are good wines in that price category. How do we reprogram people?
Okay, well, just to back up a little bit of trying to figure out where this sort of self-hating complex came from, like the call's coming from inside the house, right? So you have to look at the history of the LCBO, what they're pushing out to consumers, what they've conditioned them to think is, quote unquote quality. It's kind of largely our own fault. We've allowed this paradox to happen, right? Coupled with all of the arbitrary taxes and you want to talk about tariffs, we are not new to tariffs. Tariffs have existed in our own country for as long as I can remember. We're marking up the wines, how much? The wines that are coming from BC and Ontario, and it's illegal to have wines shipped to our respective provinces. You kind of have to point the finger at yourself and take a long, hard look in the mirror and be like, okay, well, what am I contributing to this? We're all kind of complicit, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And what I've found is the most successful is just sitting with consumers one by one in an intimate setting, debunking the stigma, showing them that wine doesn't have to be intimidating or pretentious. You can discuss it in a language that feels comfortable to you, remove all of the verbose bullshit, get rid of the PowerPoint decks, all of that nonsense, and just break bread with them, make it joyful and convivial and fun, and show them that it's about creating memories and a feeling and an emotion, as opposed to remembering which vintages were standout or the chemical compounds that represent bell pepper or fenugreek or whatever. There's a lot of archaic bullshit that's just shoved down our throats by way of our education systems and institutions, and people are afraid. They're afraid to talk about wine in a very blasé, almost callous manner because we're told that it's wrong, and you kind of get ousted or alienated or treated as some sort of pariah. And that has been my experience. So I just decided to kind of build my own empire, and now the people are coming and they're realizing, the number one thing that I hear is that I've never heard anybody talk about wine the way that you do, and this was so fun, and I didn't realize Canadian wine was so delicious. And it's a slow, methodical process, and it's a butterfly effect, because if I can create a really memorable experience for that one person, they're going to go tell 10 other people, and that's exactly what's happened. I've had clients who've been with me since the beginning, and the amount of referrals they have sent my way are completely invaluable. So that's what has been successful for me. But I'm small on a grand scale. I don't know. Maybe you guys can talk to that more.
Laura, I'd be interested to find out your demographic. Are you finding that you are the under 30 crowd, the under 40 crowd, the over 50 crowd?
So my demographic, I would say, are young professionals anywhere from mostly 30 to 50. It's with people who have discretionary income. I hate saying educated. That just sounds so condescending and patronizing, but people
It is what it is. If it is what it is, there's nothing wrong with
yeah. Professionals, a lot of healthcare workers, lawyers, just people with money to burn, and they want to learn. They're worldly, they're well traveled, and they're curious. They want anecdotes or bottles to bring to dinner parties to flex, and they come to my experience because it is a more premium experience. Like my per person price is $175, so it's not exactly for everybody, but that's intentional. Yeah, and I find that that's kind of what works, but every now and again I'll get, boomers, like more people who are elderly, like maybe in their 60s or 70s, and they're always delighted and surprised too. And then every now and again I'll get people who are in their early 20s, which I find really surprising and odd. But I would say that only accounts for about like maybe 10 or 15% of my clients. So, yeah.
And that tracks, Andre, with what we've been talking about, is the young are interested in Ontario wine and what we're doing here. The older, going back to Laura's point about what we did wrong in the past, and Laura being from British Columbia. British Columbia didn't have the bad old days that Ontario did. Ontario made Baby Duck. That was the claim to fame. That's what we called Ontario wine back in the 70s and 80s. Like, that was what Ontario wine was. And if you go into the boomer generation, that's what they remember as Ontario wine. And that's what we've had to, knock down the wall of ever since. British Columbia never had that problem because they didn't make a piece of garbage.
Oh, no, they made
like
lots
that.
of garbage too. Don't worry.
But not on a world scale of Baby Duck. Like, Baby Duck was known in New York State. It was copied by Gallo because it was so popular. It got to be a very popular wine. And if it had been during a trade war, we would have said this is Canadian, and everybody would be drinking that today.
That's actually a really good point. That's another piece to the story.
As we go along, I agree with you 100%. The LCBO has done a piss poor job, and Andre's correct. Once a month is the wrong time to be showcasing Ontario, and then every month they go, this is the Ontario wine of the month. That's putrid. But also, I do believe that the Wine Council has done a piss poor job of marketing wines as well, and the VQA screwed it up from the beginning as well. I think it's a triple-headed hydra, whatever the beast is called. I can't even remember. My Greek mythology is on the table.
Hydra's fine. Snake with multiple heads.
We understand your symbolism.
Yes.
It's also the access to the wine regions. Try and get to St. Catharines. I go to Niagara probably once or twice a month. The trains don't run there. So you either have to get someone to pick you up in Burlington or Hamilton. Like I've experienced that with Andre, trying to figure out, what time is the train leaving? Oh, one of them only leaves once every hour, or no, it's only once in the morning or once in the evening. And if you drive, it's a 54-kilometer drive. It might take you up to 2 hours.
And it's just gotten worse. Like, when I first moved to Ontario in 2007, on a bad day, it would take an hour and a half to get down to Niagara from downtown Toronto. And now it's not unusual for it to take 2.5 hours. And it's not just because of construction, it's just due to the volume of people on the road. But even with the access of visiting wine country, it's still, for many reasons, it still blows my mind, just the lack of market penetration in Toronto. And I think, like, Michael, you hit the nail on the head that we've talked about many times on this. It's a lack of support from the LCBO to do the selling. But then there's also a challenge in terms of restaurants looking for new and interesting wines. Like Laura, you recently talked about, you mentioned Fogelar is something that has been prominently, or Drink Collab in general is something that's been prominently featured on your Instagram for quite some time. You've been a great supporter of them. But these are wines that are not being featured on as many wine lists in Toronto as they should. Wines of those qualities in any other wine region would be on every wine list at those prices.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't go to any other wine region in the world that's 50 kilometers away from a world-class wine region that has 0 wines on the list. That is so unique to us, and I find it so weird and embarrassing.
You mention that to any European, and they are just absolutely shocked. Like, they can't believe it. So they're like, you get the Italians like, so you have your own wine region, we shouldn't send our wines. And you're like, no, actually, for European wines, Italy owns Ontario, and California owns Ontario for New World. So it's unbelievable. And then you throw out the fact that Toronto has more Italians outside, is the city outside of Italy with the most Italians. You know why Italy does so well in Canada, and especially in Ontario. But and again, going back to that comment, to only the Italians can make good wine. We also are fighting that part of Toronto that is Italian. So Woodbridge and that area, they're not turning their back on the home country. I'm just
we need to be a little bit more patriotic, but for some reason Canadians equate that with something evil or alt-right.
Well, I mean, that's it. It has definitely been a problem with a lack of Canadian patriotism, and I don't think I've ever seen it worse than anywhere like Toronto. I mean, it's something growing up in Saskatchewan. I think it's definitely a Western Canadian thing to have a little bit more pride in your regionality. I know it's definitely a little bit more tribalist out west, but it's never in a malicious way. Like, when you're from Saskatchewan, you're proud to be from Saskatchewan, and you have fun teasing people who are from Alberta or from Manitoba, given to a certain extent the amount of sameness. But like, I remember moving down to Toronto, and it's just this, this mediocrity, inferiority complex that Toronto has. You go to a football game in Saskatchewan, you have 35,000 people coming out to support the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where the Toronto Argonauts can barely draw 15,000 people. And meanwhile, you have people in downtown Toronto saying, well, we should be an NFL city. And they tried that. Buffalo showed up to Toronto and people didn't show up because the team wasn't good enough. It's just like complete, utter nonsense that things in Toronto don't succeed unless they succeed somewhere else. Toronto tries to call itself a world-class city, but they are nothing but trend followers. They are not trend setters. And it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Preach.
So
couldn't be more true.
To I guess maybe to tie this up on a bow, let me put a question to both of you, and I'm going to start with Michael, just because, Laura, I want you to put the bow on all of this. What do you think, if there's one thing to change, because we've highlighted a lot of issues with what's wrong with what's being done, what is something you would like to see changed that, if it happened overnight, you think would really help get people in Toronto or in Ontario to drink more Ontario wine?
God, I don't think there's one thing. I think there's a whole list of things that we should be doing.
I'm making you pick one.
And
for the sake of the podcast and the entertainment factor for the listeners, what's the number one thing, Michael?
Oh, geez, if you were really going to do a good marketing campaign, you'd mail a little half bottle to every Ontarian, and let them try a good Ontario wine. Like if you're gonna convert somebody, or at least some people, like, it's like getting that coupon in the mail. It's getting that free trial in the mail that lets you try something. Oh yeah, I do like that product. Right? Maybe there could be better access to Niagara that we all said, but I mean, everybody knows somebody with a car that'll go. But then Andre, I wish there was a magic bullet that we could put a thing on. You know what I really wish? I really wish the wineries would all get together and market together instead of having factions like the big guys against the little guys. We have three different unions or organizations that are supposedly promoting wine in Ontario, and there should be just one. One voice to the government, and one voice to the people. I think we should drop the word quality out of VQA. I think we should have 2 levels of VQA. I have so many ideas of how to fix it, and nobody seems to want to do it.
So I know I said one thing, and I actually appreciate, because the funny thing is, the first thing that you said would require about 960,000 cases of wine to send a bottle to every person in Ontario. But
at the moment I said it, I'm like, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. It's not laundry soap.
But everything else you said should be relatively easy solutions. And it's frustrating that it hasn't happened. Look.
I don't think we should leave it up to the LCBO either. As much as I hate the LCBO, it's not the LCBO's job. The LCBO's job is to make money for the province. They sell what sells. And I get it. So that's their job. But what we shouldn't be stopping are VQA stores or Canadian-only stores from popping up like they have in British Columbia.
You know what?
That is the number one thing I think that should be happening in Toronto. Why is the VQA store is the destination store for Ontario wine, where all Ontario wine is housed, in St. Catharines? That is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, it's because the LCBO considers the wineries a competitor. So like the paradigm shift needs to be taken on both sides. And I agree with everything that you said, Michael. And Laura, before we get to you, Michael, you said probably the one thing that I would like to see. You know what? Fine. Maybe we don't need the LCBO to completely disappear. I think everyone's going to need a retailer where they can buy their beloved Josh or bread and butter. But it would be an instant switch overnight if we could let people like Laura or people like me or people like you, Michael, open up our own little boutique wine shops that would actually serve our niche customers that we would cultivate ourselves, because the LCBO does a piss poor job at servicing people who are legitimately interested in wine, or who are interested in wines that aren't produced on a massive scale, or interested in wines from wineries that don't have multi-million-dollar marketing budgets. There's room in the market for these wines, and the LCBO doesn't serve them. And like you said, Michael, the LCBO's job is to make money for the province. Can you imagine how much more money, especially in a climate where sales of entry-level wines are declining, to allow boutique stores to enter the market? How much more money would be made for the government to allow us to serve the province? That's what I think could change overnight, and we get more people drinking Ontario wine and make things better for the province. Laura, what's your one thing?
I think you know what it is.
What's
You
that?
want to take a guess?
I can't. There's so many things you and I talk about off the microphone.
Privatization. Get rid of the monopolies. Poof, gone.
But that's what I said. But with more words.
I mean, that's the solution. It's like the bullshit that they put these wineries through, the arbitrary taxes and fees that exist simply to exist as a producer, how you get absolutely slammed with more taxation. Say if you're not VQA certified, but you want to get listed in a restaurant, you have to pay another like 47% tax or something. It's not sustainable. It's authoritarian. It's so totalitarian and draconian and just tyrannical. And my whole banner for Ontario, just because this is where I am, but it's across the country, because everywhere in Canada is a monopoly. It's complain and comply. Change is not going to come by way through compliance. Like, we need a mutiny. Like, we need a fucking Canadian wine mutiny. And I've been saying this for so long. And yeah, I'm very openly and publicly breaking rules. And to my benefit, the monopoly is incompetent as all hell. So
yes,
just and to Michael's point, yeah, band together, power of the fucking people. Like, come on. I don't get it. It's just, I'm shouting into the abyss and nobody is hearing me. It's just crazy. So.
You know what? One cherry on this Sunday I just want to add, and I think most of the people who are unfortunately listening to this podcast would already know about this, but it's the thing that drives me nuts when we talk about privatization. The number of people who say that, Doug Ford is dismantling something that pays for our healthcare. When you walk into a bright, shiny LCBO store, the money and the revenue that's coming in from the LCBO is paying for that overhead. The glossy LCBO Food and Drink magazine, there's overhead for that. The big head office with hundreds of employees in downtown Toronto, there's overhead for that. That is money that is being robbed from the people of Ontario that could be paying for our health care. As someone who is now running a bakery and someone who is running a wine business, we do everything we can to mitigate our overhead so that we can make as much money as possible. If George Salias wants to come on this fucking podcast and tell me that he is running the most efficient business possible, it's an open invitation, Georgie boy. You're more than welcome to come on here and tell me how good of a job you're doing for the people of Ontario.
Yeah, no, it just follow the money, right? It's protectionism on display, full display.
I have always wanted privatization. I have always thought that was the way to go. But I once sat in on a seminar by I don't remember the guy's name. He was from British Columbia, and he was saying that British Columbia was going at that time. The British Columbia was going towards the private version and public system, where the public system will buy your J-Lors, they'll buy your Joshes, they'll buy your Miomis, they'll buy from the big guys, but there'll also be, room to open up a private store. And if you can find your niche market, then you find your niche. I remember hearing the story about a lady who opened up a shop right across from the largest LDB shop in Vancouver. And she just stocked, tiny producers and niche markets, niche stuff, and everybody said she was going to get crushed. She blew the doors off the place because she did so well. Because it was the people, anybody who wanted Josh, head on in. Wolf Blast, head on into the you want to see something different? You want to see something unique? You want to see something really good? You headed across the road and you shopped at her place. And she did very well. And I think that's what's needed. I think it is to allow the market to open up more, to allow us to find the niche and to stop the LCBO's, say, vintages program. Let vintages stuff be found by agents who want to open a store.
Well, and allow wineries to ship interprovincially too.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing where.
Now, I understand that's coming. I understand that's coming July 1st. Mark Carney gets in. He says he's going to open the doors.
Yeah, they've been saying that for a decade.
Why is it taking so long? Like, that's honest to God. I think it's a lack of political will where we have these premiers sitting in their offices and they're just dragging their feet because they don't really want this. It's a lack of political will. Mark Carney, who is essentially our interim prime minister, found a way to get rid of the carbon tax. The only reason that the interprovincial borders have not been struck down already is a complete lack of political will, and it's embarrassing. It's a testament to the ridiculous bureaucracy that we're dealing with in this country.
My understanding is it's the provinces that drag their feet, because I heard that Trudeau opened it up.
They have. Actually, it was Stephen Harper who opened it up. Michael, you and I have been talking about this for the past 15 years. It's the provinces that are dragging their feet. There is no provincial election taking place in this country right now. So the reason that these interprovincial borders still exist today on March 27th is literally due to a lack of political will. That is it.
And let's be honest, though. If you wanted to get a bottle of BC wine, and Laura's, as she said, she's flying right in the face of it. You wanted to get a bottle of BC wine, you can talk to Laura, or you can phone up the winery if you want a case of it. And I'm 70% of BC wineries will send it.
Oh, more than that.
They'll actually send the wine. Yeah. They'll send it. They don't care. Let them find it. Let them go. Figure out what, let them find me, basically, is what they're saying.
But that's the nature of the current culture that we're living in. It's like you back people into a corner, and as such, you sort of proliferate this parallel economy. Like we're existing in a black market.
But what's really weird is that you talk to Ontario wineries and they don't want to do it. And it's like, why wouldn't you do it?
Well, the Ontario wineries I work with do.
Okay, perfect.
You know what? I think this is a conversation that all three of us could keep going on and on, because it's something we're clearly all very passionate about. Laura, can I pre-invite you to join us on for another episode where we can go on a high note? Maybe we do a bit of a show and tell with the three of us, because all three of us I know are very passionate about Ontario wines, and you are definitely tasting, I think, from different places that Michael and I regularly taste, and it might be fun for us to get together and just talk about some wines that the three of us love. But I think it would be nice, because it's been a while, Michael, since you and I have gotten this worked up on an episode with all of us, and I certainly want to end this on a high note. Laura, people can find you at Crushable Wine Club on Instagram. You're happy to host anyone who's looking to do a tasting, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And in between your tastings, you have a fantastic newsletter, which is occasionally spicy, but you curate fantastic packages of Canadian wines. In the interest of full disclosure, you've curated wines and ciders from the ADX Wine Company, and we very much appreciate you and the work that you've been doing. So how can people sign up for your mailing list to make sure that they don't miss out on the opportunity, if you're listening in Ontario, to potentially get your hand on some great BC wines you might not have heard of?
So just head to my website, crushable.club. And then you can just go to the sign up tab, and it's all a voluntary opt-in. There's no minimums, or I don't take your credit card. You just get the emails and you buy it or you don't. And there's a lot of BC wineries, just because that's where I'm originally from. So I have a lot of great relationships out that way. So people are more than willing to get their wines out here, because they've never really had the opportunity to do so before. And in fact, this week I'm featuring a winery from the Fraser Valley called Whispering Horse, a phenomenal winery that more people should know about. If you want to talk about quality, like, you pour that blind for anyone internationally and they're going to be blown away. So.
And Michael.
Well, I would say that it's been a while since we've dropped so many F-bombs, Andre. So we've really got we've tried to clean up our act, and today we actually just went right down into the
I
hole
like
again.
it. I like the passion.
Well, that's it though. It's a topic that we all care about. So maybe let's start the sign off.
And so you've got your work cut out for you, Andre, with the bleeping and the this week in unnecessary.
I'm not bleeping anything in this episode. It's a lost cause. I'm just going to record a short disclaimer off the top that everybody listening has already heard.
I'm Michael Pincus of michaelpincuswinereview.com. I can be found as the Grape Guy on most social media, Michael Pincus on other things. Andre, I'm looking forward to getting home, believe it or not.
Yeah, I'm Andre Prue at andrewinereview.ca. My website is now up to date. I've fully updated it with I neglected it for 2 years, but it's now back from the dead with you'll never miss a bit of content that I've got on the works. And Andre Wine Review on all social media. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Patreon.com/2guystalkingwine. Michael, we really need to start promoting that. We don't have a lot of people supporting us. Surely one or two more of our loyal regular listeners could help us keep the lights on. You know what? Actually, okay. Michael, before you say what you're about to say, I can actually sell ahead. Our next episode is definitely going to be a high note, but it is going to be an episode to make people think. You had a chance to sit down with a very influential winemaker in Bordeaux. You did your interview in French, which I'm very proud of you for pulling off. We're in the middle of translating it. We are going to be speaking with Danny Roland in the next episode of Two Guys Talking Wine.
Yeah, I think that was a very exciting interview for me. One, to do it in French, with my French immersion, 10 years of French immersion French. You've already made fun of me a few times with my choice of lingo.
Okay, I want to be clear. I wasn't making fun of you. I just found it amusing, some of the word choices that you chose. But we'll talk about that next week. Take us away, Michael.
Well, from both Laura and Andre in Ontario, and me for the last time in Italy for now, good night.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Two Guys Talking Wine on iTunes.
Two Guys Talking Wine is produced by Adam Duran and Ken Little.